With only 1 day left of campaigning, Democrats are confronting the nightmare scenario they always feared, a referendum on President Biden's handling of the economy. According to CNN, strategists have all but abandoned hope that the protection of abortion rights and democracy are enough to convince voters to keep both the House and the Senate blue.
Recent Siena College polling shows that in the lead up to midterms, the GOP focused on issues that voters found increasingly important, like inflation, the economy, and immigration. Meanwhile, Democrats hedged their bets on issues voters grew to care less and less about, like abortion, the threat to democracy, and also gun policies. Longtime Democratic strategist Hillary Rosen had this to say about Dems' midterm strategy over the weekend.
I'm a loyal Democrat, but I am not happy. I just think that we did not listen to voters in this election, and I think we're going to have a bad night. And, this conversation is not going to have much impact on Tuesday, but I hope it has an impact going forward, because when voters tell you over and over and over again that they care mostly about the economy, listen to them. Stop talking about democracy being at stake.
Yeah, I think it's good advice. I guess the only issue with that, though, is maybe the Democrats don't think they have a winning hand on any of the issues that voters care most about right now. So they wanted to talk about other things, because what are they going to say on immigration, on inflation, et cetera? But I guess that speaks to kind of larger problems with the policy focus of the Biden administration, which is, as unlimited money to Ukraine and, whatever we're doing with oil and energy and just kind of staying the course, even though voters are saying, no, but the voters want different policies. They can't dress up the policies as something other than what they are.
So I think I disagree with you a little bit. I think this is a much more systemic problem, which is that, we don't have a political divide in this country. We have a class divide. Mm-hmm. We have one class of Americans, the majority of Americans, who are very worried about the things that middle class and working class people worry about, which are inflation, crime, and immigration. People coming across the border to take working class people's jobs. And then we have a class that has the luxury of sitting around and worrying about things like democracy, worrying about things like, late-term abortions, worrying about things like climate change. These have become, in this economy, with this level of crime, with this open border, those have become luxury beliefs that you have to have a certain status in order to have the luxury of caring about those things, which the majority of Americans just don't have. 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And I will just say one more thing, which is that what is a bigger threat to democracy than not being able to walk to the corner store without being shot at, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is a bigger threat to democracy than not having a national border? Right? I mean, the Democrats they're not really legislating. They're not really ruling over, democracy. They are actually presenting threats to it at every level. I mean, what is a bigger threat to democracy than listening to what 2/3 of Americans are begging you to do and doing the opposite? Right? I mean, that's literally the opposite of democracy. So when they sit there and say, only one side cares about democracy, but the biggest threats to democracy in this nation are coming from that side. Well,
and it's a kind of, rhetorical cheat to say democracy is threatened by my side losing, by the outcome of democracy is 100%. Going to be a threat. Democracy is not what's threatened. The Democratic Party is what's threatened largely because of the policy choices it's made. I mean, Joe Biden won the election in 2020. Voters chose Biden and what he was running on over Trump. They did not want more of Trump. They can't stand him. So they chose Biden. The Democrats had total control of government, and they had an opportunity to do something that voters would want, and their policy preferences, where they focused, has totally lost voters, and now they're on the precipice of getting really wiped out because it's the economy, stupid. Everyone seems to get that message, except for the MSM. Joy Ann Reid over at MSNBC had this to say about voters' inflation concerns. Let's watch.
The people I ever hear use the word inflation are journalists and economists, right? So that is not part of the normal lexicon of the way people talk. So it's interesting that Republicans are doing something they don't normally do, right? Which is not use the common tongue, right? Not use just common English to sort of do on their campaigns like they're doing with crime. But what they've done is they've taught people the word inflation, right?
Yeah.
Most people who would have never used that word ever in their lives are using it now because they've been taught it, including on TV, including in newspapers. They've been taught this word, and they sort of wrap this word around whatever it is that they really want to vote, the reasons they really want to vote.
That's so incredible because it's the opposite. Common people know what inflation is because they pay very close attention. They better understand inflation than the wealthy and the privileged, the progressive elite, because if the price of bread goes up 10 cents, Joy Ann Reid is never going to notice that, but working people, middle class people do notice that. So they know exactly what inflation is. It's obvious why that would be a top concern. I'm a fairly privileged person. I balk at my grocery bill these days. It's incredible. It's something that people absolutely have always paid attention to. This idea that Republicans just trained or hypnotized voters into caring about it or knowing what it is. No, they knew what it was. It's such unbelievably myopic thinking.
And it's just so condescending. I mean, first of all, even if it were true that people didn't know what inflation was, a lot of people don't know what a myocardial infarction is. They know if they have a heart attack, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know it when you're experiencing it. And the fact that Republicans have given language to voters who are experiencing something that the Democrats won't talk about, that's to their credit. And you saw the same thing with critical race theory, the same thing when Glenn Youngkin won. And they were sitting there being like, they don't know what critical race theory is. It's like, well, you know what? Republicans have given them the language to describe the thing they're seeing with their very eyes. When the Democrats and the progressives sit there and say, who you gonna believe, me or your lying eyes? They tell them not to believe what they're seeing with their own eyes in their own pocketbooks. Can you imagine being a millionaire and sitting there saying, people don't understand, they don't really know what inflation is. They don't really experience inflation. This is just hypnotism from the conservative media. It's so gross. And to your point earlier, you're so right about democracy. You have this situation where the Democrats have talked themselves into it. When we win, it's democracy. When they win, it's fascism, right? And they literally cannot see that they have lost the mandate. They have lost the will of the people. So many Americans are sitting there literally begging them, bring down my grocery bill. Stop the crime in my neighborhood. Is that too much to ask? And it is. And so they come up with all of this other language to talk about things that are not really concerns of the American people, to distract. And then you see people like President Obama showing up and then just smearing people who disagree with them because those people had the misfortune of not being millionaires who own, enormous properties on Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the case. And also the fear of Republicans or Trump or whoever stealing, elections by cheating or by, refusing to acknowledge the results. To be clear, I understand why there was that fear. Trump's behavior in the wake of 2020 was abhorrent, destructive, and it was self-destructive because has, I think, dramatically lowered his chances of ever being elected president again. But all that said, he could be elected again legitimately. Republicans could be elected again legitimately. They're about to be elected legitimately in all over the country because Democrats are just going to lose for having concentrated on the wrong things. So this threat to democracy, this threat to the system, the structures, it's not going to get stolen from you. You're just going to lose because you've lost what the mandate of the people is, which is what happens. This is a cyclical. Our two-sided nature to our politics ensures that no side tends to dominate, have extreme dominance for very long. You'll have the party win, and then maybe they have both houses of Congress, and then they lose one or the other, then they're out of power. It just switches. It's a constant turnover that I think is unhealthy, and that we really get really worked up because it's always so close, and it's so close in so many states, and our debates feel more acrimonious or more cutthroat because it feels like it's a really close battle all the time. That's the downside of it. The upside is that one side wins and then they lose the next. Like there's talks of like one side or the other assembling this like permanent governing majority or something is not possible. You don't have enough popular approval for either one side to just have a total mandate. So there will always be the other side checking you in the next election cycle, if not that one, the one after, which is a very interesting dynamic that has pluses and minuses. So
Absolutely.
we'll be back with more Rising right after this. Stay tuned.